Well, the circus is in town, everyone.
Two ducks.
Yes, that is Sir Ed Davey, the stunt-loving leader of the Liberal Democrats and former Postal Affairs Minister, often dubbed as the clown of British politics by commentators. Well, today he made his keynote speech at his party conference. Davey, who was prancing around Bournemouth like a man who just discovered gravity after one too many bungee jumps, delivered a speech that's less a vision for Britain and more a deranged therapy session aimed at one man, Nigel Farage. And speaking of obsession, let's tally Ed's Farage derangement syndrome, shall we?
Farage, Nigel Farage. Give Farage so much time and attention. Farage, Nigel Farage, Nigel Farage. Farage's Britain. Farage's Britain, Nigel, and Farage's Britain. Farage's Britain. The threat that reform now poses to our country and our democracy. Farage's Britain. Nigel Farage.
Well, yeah, he mentioned Nigel Farage a whopping 32 times, painting him as the architect of every ill, from Brexit to school shootings. It's pathological, Ed. And reform, he name-dropped that party 5 times. As always, this is the bogeyman, the threat to our democracy, isn't it? To our values. Reform is a threat to our NHS as well, apparently. And what about Keir Starmer? You know, the man who's actually running the country. How many times do you think he mentioned him? Not a single mention by name. Not one. Davey referenced the Prime Minister once in passing when he was boasting about raising carers issues with him. Never by name. In fact, he mentioned Trump more times than Labour. And the bias is so overt, isn't it? So easily exposed for everyone to see. You love Keir, don't you, Ed? He's your political idol, a man you can't wait to offer a coalition agreement with at the next election. That's what your thinly guised bias is all about, isn't it? And I'll happily take on that bet right now with anyone who wants to disagree with me. In interviews over the last few days, Davey spewed the dangerous rhetoric that's plagued American politics for over a decade now and led to exceptional political violence and indeed assassinations. Yes, he continued to call Nigel Farage a threat to our democracy.
Out these Lego models of Nigel Farage, that's him dressed as Donald Trump. I mean, this guy is living rent-free in your brain. He's got 5 MPs, you've got 72. Why are you bothering about it?
Because he's a threat to our country and to our democracy. What he wants to do, and that's why it looks a bit like Donald Trump, is he wants to bring Trump's America to the United Kingdom. I think people who care about British values don't want to be, an adjunct to Trump's America.
Well, Ed Davey still cannot seem to fathom the personal danger his words pose to politicians in our country. This language is divisive and it is dangerous. Davey also repeated the unsubstantiated... I can't say that word. The unsubstantiated... I can't say it, I'm moving on. Repeated the claim... having a bit of a mare tonight. Repeated the claim that we could return hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants back to the EU had we not left the super bureaucracy. On paper, we could, of course, do that. But why on earth did that not happen in 2018, when the crisis started then, Ed? When were we still in the EU and we couldn't deport those migrants? How many did we actually send back to the EU, Ed? Is it the inconvenient truth that they wouldn't take them back at all? Is it because it's a completely manufactured statement you're spewing to the public in a desperate attempt to undermine the biggest exercise of democracy in our country? Well, that's not very Democrat of you, is it, Ed? Well, Ed Davey's speech wasn't leadership. It was a desperate bid for relevance from a party that's become the establishment's useful idiot. The same desperation we can all see while you make yourself look like a total fool as you backflip around the country. What we saw today wasn't leadership. It was a one-man hate campaign against a rival who's actually connecting with the voters. The Lib Dems lost a long time ago. Some would say it's pure jealousy. So if we're asking who really is a danger to British people, I'd hypothetically say is probably an incompetent politician that oversaw a huge scandal that led to innocent people taking their own lives. Many other innocent people banged up in prison. A politician who blamed everyone but themselves for the Post Office scandal. But, Ed Davey, I possibly couldn't point to who that politician is, could I?
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver, and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
But let's get the thoughts of my panel. I have Jonathan List, journalist. I have GB News contributor Will Kingston and political commentator Chloe Dobbs. Will, I'll start with you.
Sure. I enjoyed how well substantiated your comments were, by the way, Alex.
I can say unsubstantiated. There we go. I can say it. Now, I do have a moment when I just can't say a word for some reason. But unsubstantiated claims. But what I wanted to ask you is this. Ed Davey has made a point over the last few days about rhetoric, about division, about unity. But then he goes on to call Reform UK and Nigel Farage a threat to democracy. Now, that screams the word fascism, which is what you would use to describe Nazis. Is he just a bit two-faced on this issue, Will?
Well, what you've got to remember is when leftists use the term people who divide us, what they mean is people that we disagree with. They don't care about division, and in fact, division is good in a democracy. Division means a contest of ideas. What they're saying is that we have a particular narrative that we think is the right narrative, and anyone else we believe should be suppressed, or at worst, and again, this is what you're getting at, we think that there is a particular permission structure which enables political violence. That's why that political violence is inherent in leftist ideology in the way that it just isn't on the right.
Yeah, Jonathan's already having a meltdown in the corner over there, so I'll wait for him to finish and I'll come to you first, Chloe. So look, Nigel Farage doesn't go around calling people threats to democracy, does he? He doesn't do that. I haven't seen him do that at any of his conferences. He talks about policies. He spends his time talking about what's going wrong with the country. Ed Davey spent 30 name drops there of man Nigel Farage. Not a single name drop of Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. What does that tell you, Chloe?
Well, it tells you that he's thinking about getting into a coalition with Keir Starmer, so he doesn't want to criticise him too much. Also, it tells you just how well Reform are doing. Reform are completely leading the national conversation in politics at the moment, and hence everybody's responding to them. They're not responding to what Keir Starmer said or what Kemi Badenoch has announced. I mean, Kemi Badenoch hasn't really come up with that many policies in her, over a year as the Tory party leader, so she still seems to be thinking about it. But Reform have been out at press conferences announcing what they're going to do, being bold in what they're going to do, and hence everybody is talking about it. And when they've led, over 100 opinion polls, quite rightly, other parties, like the Lib Dems, like the Labour Party, we're going to have Keir Starmer go on the attack against Farage as well at the Labour Party conference coming up. It just shows how incredibly well they're doing. I mean, I think 6 months ago, you had Number 10 saying we think there's a 50-50 chance that our main opponent will be Reform or the Conservatives at the general election. But it seems very clear, I think, to them, as you can see it in their rhetoric now, that Farage is going to be their main opponent.
Yeah, which is baffling, because you still expect with the country and the state it is today to be tackling the government. They're the ones they're probably going to win votes from if they're going to try and win the Labour Party votes, but they're not bothering. Jonathan, this Farage mania, people are calling it Farage derangement syndrome. You'd expect, if this is a guy who was the other day flying the Union Jack, saying he wants to unite the country, not to use such divisive rhetoric like threats to democracy. That's completely unsubstantiated. Got it there.
Well, Alex, what is a bigger danger or division? Being a threat to democracy or calling someone out for being a threat to democracy. This is the absurd case we have on the right. So Will's always talking about the left. This is what happens on the right. You think that saying something is worse than actually doing that thing. That is what I find so completely ludicrous about this. Look, I agree with Chloe, actually, that because Reform is doing so well, obviously, and that is where the Lib Dems are going to have the richest seam of traction and opposition, it's not in their interest to go so much against Keir Starmer for a simple electoral reason, which is that Lib Dems and Labour are hardly rivals in any seats. So the Tories are going to be the Lib Dems' main rivals, or indeed Reform. Labour and the Lib Dems are not going to be fighting each other in the next election, and depending on how the electoral calculus resolves itself after the election, they may need to work together. So it makes sense, as Chloe says. And obviously, and the other point is that Farage poses a much greater risk than Keir Starmer does, to a Liberal anyway.
But you say the words that you say aren't important, and that what would you be more fearful of, a threat to democracy or actually someone who says the word threat to democracy? But there's no evidence that Reform are some Nazi party, that they're going to overthrow the democratic system here. And we do see the words that you say do play out in.
Well, I never said. You said
to lock up someone who tried to assassinate Donald Trump.
You said the word Nazi, not me. What I would say is that Trump is clearly Farage's hero, and Farage makes no bones about that. And Trump is a fascist. And Trump literally tried to overthrow the government. He launched a coup against the United States. Well, you're denying it, are you? So in full-scale revisionism, fine. Well, I happen to remember 2021, even if you don't. And everything he's done since then has simply corroborated that.
I know you don't seem to think that saying things is that important, but I do think that just throwing around words like fascist has serious consequences. Donald Trump has had 2 assassination attempts on his life, and it is because of people just calling him a fascist.
He's called people fascists himself. He calls people on the left fascists all the time, actually.
I'd note that Jonathan did exactly what Ed Davey did, which is just to mindlessly throw out the Farage as a threat to democracy without giving any example or reasoning as to how he is a threat to democracy. The term threat to democracy means that there will no longer be choice of your leadership in a country moving forward. Of course, that is not the case with Nigel Farage. So the reason people say this is just to delegitimise him, and that's not the case. The other thing that I would add about Ed Davey is that this is obviously a party that has a severe identity crisis. The reason he would be speaking about Farage so much is because he's got no idea what the Liberal Democrats are or what they stand for. This was the party that believed in classical liberalism. They junked that. They then just went full anti-Brexit. They can't do that anymore. And now they're a party which kind of goes, well, what are we here for? They don't know. And so the answer is just bash Nigel Farage end on end.
Well, actually, the Lib Dems had some sense. In fact, there is a really strong contingent of the British public that would actually like to enhance relations with the EU beyond what Labour is proposing. And so I think that the Lib Dems could catch a trick, actually, by positioning themselves more fully as the rejoined party. Now, it wouldn't open as many wounds on the Lib Dem side as it would on Labour, because the Lib Dems were so unified against Brexit. So that is one thing they could do. But in Will's defence, and not something I say very often, but the Lib Dems do have, they've always had an identity crisis, because they've always fought the Conservatives in the southwest, and they've always fought Labour in sort of big cities, and so they've tried to sort of appeal to both those constituencies at the same time, and that has actually worked quite well for them. They do have 72 seats. I would like them to be a lot bolder in what they're doing.
I think the reason they've only got 72 seats is simply because the Tory vote just completely collapsed. But the same like Labour, that's the reason why they got their landslide. But anyway, we'll see at the next election, shall we? Let's see if I can read some words now, shall we? Speaking about the post office scandal previously, Sir Ed Davey said this: "The Horizon post office scandal is the greatest miscarriage of justice of our time, and I am deeply sorry for the families who have had their lives ruined by it. As one of the ministers over the 20 years of this scandal, including my time as minister responsible for postal affairs, I'm sorry I did not see through the post office's lies, and that it took me 5 months to meet Alan Bates, the man who has done so much to uncover it."
Well done, mate. You've still got it.
Yeah, I've still got it. I can still read words, can't we? Right, anyway, moving on. Time for our latest Great Britain